Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would be present within one of the streets of my UK-based neighbourhood, a 5-minute walk from where my house resided in fact. It wasn't long before another individual entered the scene, a male human, that although his appearance was unfamiliar to my personal self, he exuded a powerful sense of awareness, and real awareness impressions would provide assurances that he was a real guide operating in such an outer form. He approached me and seemed requiring of as though a report regarding a situation that had preceded the scene where my real side view had opened up. That although the personal self may only be shown glimpses, parts and fragments of the full multitude of what's taking place multi-dimensionally throughout creation, where many an occasion we find the real side view beginning at a stage as though we had missed several scenes, like entering a movie theatre late, the real awareness that we are, as a part of the isness everything reality, permeating through all consciousness affecting creational simulation. So in reality there is nothing taking place that the real you is not aware of, as everything is present within the true reality that we each actually are. It is only the personal self that is limited in regards to how much of what's creationally occurring is revealed to it, but oftentimes, despite entering a real side experience part way through, we still may lean to the real awareness to fill in the blanks, so to speak, to avail us with the scenes that the personal self wasn't shown but are important to be unveiled, that greater understanding and discernment of an experience's meaning can be attained. Many experiences will proceed regardless of the personal self's understanding of them, as though the little created self was but a passenger in a car, the journey determined by the real awareness. But always is the possibility of the personal self involving itself, and if it does so based on misunderstanding due to lack of information, then the personal self's motivations will be based on flawed perceptions, and the outcome may not be favourable. This real side experience was very much a case where the personal self was at the fore for whatever reason, and for the experience to proceed, so required was an update I was to provide to the guide, but where the real awareness would indeed afford details as to what had occurred just prior to my inception into the experiential view, and thus I could give the guide that which he required. Although, as a real guide, he would in actuality already know, so perhaps just a test to ensure I was focused in such a way that I wasn't fully personal self immersed, operating as the little self yes, but accessing and tuned in, so to speak, to the real awareness, where additional detail and information was always accessible. What had transpired but moments ago was an influx of ill-intended black magic practitioners surging into the streets of my neighbourhood, the sense of as though they trying to gain access to my consciousness on the real side, consciousness as represented by the recreated physical level house that was but a stone's throw from where they had manifested. They were led by none other than the Notorious Reptilians, Harry and Johnee, and although, as I said, my personal self hadn't witnessed what had taken place, the real awareness impressions were of their effort of a possible attempted consciousness accessing being nullified by myself and a group of other individuals, and we had rather hounded them from the scene. They were forced to retreat and vacate the streets of my neighbourhood. The report of these happenings I would deliver to the guide to his satisfaction, and it seemed now I was to proceed with an objective involving Harry and Johnee. For as it transpired, I recently had been adopting an alternative outer guise and obfuscating my physical level identity for the purposes of infiltration on the real side. I had successfully been taken into Joanie's confidence, establishing myself with them that would facilitate my ability to carry out certain operations that would more successfully nullify their ill-intended activities than were I to do so without operating as an infiltrator. Despite the concealing of the actuality of myself and physical level identity, it seems they still harboured suspicions, and as though were delving through my filter layers of obfuscation in an effort to unveil if there was a deception on my part, as though they were conducting a thorough background check, and this expressed as they are manifesting rather close to home, so to speak, in streets close in proximity to my recreated physical level consciousness representing house, though not the exact street where my house was placed. Necessary had it been to misdirect them to retain my anonymity, and this expressed simulated wise as myself and a group driving them from the streets where they had appeared. Though during this repelling of the witches I had assumed my actual physical level human body type, and not the form I had been operating with as I masqueraded as one of their allies. It seemed I had maintained my anonymity, at least for the time being. My true identity remained concealed, and although always the suspicious pair, Johnee and Harry, were still accepting of my presence, and where I could continue to operate incognito and seek to sabotage and interfere with their operations. And now I would have an audience with them, finding them stationed in a random recreational area surrounded by streets, and they were accompanied by another individual, a male human. They would demand that I seat myself. I would do so, and the individual with them unveiled a very sophisticated laptop computer, and where he proceeded to run a background check on me. As I mentioned, their suspicions were never allayed, but until they had a confirmation of my deception, they would continue to entertain my presence among them. It was as though that despite being on the real side, the individual's computer was able to tune into my very consciousness and connect with any and all technology I utilized on the physical level as a means of determining my physical level identity, earthly location, etc., and to do so would have me revealed and exposed. This possible means of exposure had been accounted for, and it was as though I had embedded a version of a VPN or location scrambler within my very consciousness, and the individual was resigned to confessing his inability to determine my point of origin, concluding that I therefore couldn't be a human based on the physical planet Earth. This satisfied Johnee and Harold, but assuredly they would be keeping a watchful eye upon me. That they had elected to recruit me, so to speak, was due to my real awareness-afforded abilities that would be of service to them despite their suspicions as to my loyalties. Impressions revealed that although I would need to perform certain required tasks then, that I remain an asset to them, that my position be retained, and where I could proceed with my actual disrupting objectives of their operations, I would ensure my contributions to their ill-intended causes were marginal at best, just enough to keep me relevant, but not to the extent that they actually make any ill-intended impact. The real awareness would take care of the particulars, and inevitably would come a point where my lack of results would become rather apparent to them, and where I would extract myself therefore, and ideally at a stage where I had executed my actual objectives. Johnee and Harry would suddenly transform into monstrous creatures before my eyes, only vaguely resembling their former human appearances, as though trying to impress, or perhaps intimidate me, fear being the most effective mechanism of maintaining acquiescence as utilized by the dark forces in all their expressions. They looked very demonic now indeed, with the distorted faces and gaping mouths of over-exaggerated size proportions, but I would remain seated as they pressed against me with razor-sharp teeth-filled maws large enough that they could have swallowed me whole. They would then resume their former human body types and proceed to demonstrate their black magical abilities by manifesting various phenomena, and I would do likewise, as it was these abilities, as made possible via my real awareness, that had impressed them enough that I was able to place myself within their confidence. I had been working on encouraging them to release a documentary series where they could demonstrate their magical abilities for all to see. For I determined that should they expose their black magic skills for all to behold, this would be rather a confirmation that they were not the guide-backed intermediaries of the all-is that they claimed to be. They were reluctant to proceed with my idea, but I was rather convincing, and presented a compelling argument as to how doing such would be in their best interests. Simply a case of grooming and stroking their egos, really. So immersed within their own created consciousness distortions were they, that they were unable to see with clarity all the potential fallout possibilities of their actions. They would concede to my persistence, and I would dismiss myself momentarily from their presence, announcing the necessity of securing all that I required to film, edit, and put together their black magic unveiling documentary. It seemed on the surface unlikely that they would have agreed to such. Their facade is only maintained as their actual intent and sordid activities remain unknown, but as I said, I knew exactly what to say, the buttons to push, to convince them to agree. And additionally, as I mentioned, I would be proceeding with further objectives that would undermine their ill-intended operations until such time as my motives became apparent, and where I would be forced to withdraw with what minimal service I had provided them during my tenure in association. In an unrelated scene that followed, I would be afforded a brief glimpse of developments in regards to the inbound to Earth alien armada initiative, where ideally a confederation of awareness becoming and assorted alien species seek to bring humanity into their awareness conglomeration, an operation as orchestrated by DUANE and the real guides, and where any individual is at liberty to involve themselves to ensure its execution. The real side view always has been of the skies above every continent of the earth filled with the ships of the armada, but as agreements fluctuate and the various influences, dark forces, etc. come to bear, so has there been a variation in the final outcome, the particulars and nuances of which I have been sharing over the years as they are revealed to me. My last update would include the necessity of the Armada fleet utilizing an alternative dimensional route to reach the Earth via portals positioned in the local solar system, facilitated by a number of human abductees, contactees, through the reformatting of their consciousnesses. In this most recent real-side experiential revelation, I would be travelling in a car through streets in an unfamiliar location of the Earth, and the sense was of the impending arrival of the Armada. So indeed, this would be a further confirmation that this event was still on track to become a physical level manifest in whatever final variation of a form it would take. The driver of the car would be my father, though impressions revealed it was in actuality a real guide assuming this outer form. The guides have a tendency to adopt the external guises of parental figures and older siblings. For myself, it is generally the forms of my grandfather and my father that the guides will assume. As I have mentioned on previous Armada updates, the fleet must traverse dimensions to reach the Earth, and various methods are employed that this can be successful, which can result in some interesting phenomena manifesting accordingly. In the last update, the portals set to be utilized were very apparent even from the ground of the planet Earth, so vast were they in size. In this real-side update, impressions revealed that an alternative method of alien armada arrival to the Earth was being employed, that rather than the armada traversing dimensions to reach the Earth, instead the Earth was being as though removed from its current position to an alternative dimension, which would allow the ability of the fleet to converge with the planet, and the bringing of humanity into the Awareness Confederation be exacted. Prior to this planetary displacement scenario, would a particular ship of the fleet manifest in the night skies above us, one with the technological ability to shift an entire planet from one dimensional position to another. It had the appearance of a very large and silver metallic cuboid, though each surface of which was concave. as it somewhat revolved on the spot, so the technology it boasted would be brought to bear, the Earth's dimensional relocation was initiated. The guide, in my father's form, and myself, vacated the car to observe this unfolding situation. That as the vast cube continued to spin and revolve on its axis, so the stars that littered the night skies above would begin to move at a rapidly increasing pace, as though taking on a sudden mobility. The sky also would be alternating between night and day in rapid succession. There were a number of other visual phenomena occurring, all in relation to this Earth dimensional relocation effort being in a process. The experience and brief view would end at that point, as though the outcome was at that moment undetermined, every effect dependent on agreement as it is, suggesting the idea causality wasn't cemented, that a decisive result be determined, as though the consciousness agreements in regards to this option were still in flux and yet to solidify. But ultimately, this was the most recent variation trying to be actualized, the removing of the Earth to an alternative dimensional position where the armada fleet can more easily come into conjunction with the planet and humanity as a species, thus allowing the ideal scenario to be executed, the embracing of the human race into the awareness confederation of alien species, all for the purposes of facilitating better the awareness, and ultimately all is recognition where the process is taken to a conclusion of all involved. And it will be interesting to see what further developments and necessary variations are revealed in regards to this in the moments to come, the effected outcome always determined by the arrangement of consciousness placed and held to agreements, as it must always be in created simulators where cause and effect principles apply.